For those of you who may not know me, I'm Don Stillwagon, otherwise known as the father of the bride. Having been the father of the groom twice before, and that's not saying much of those previous events, I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity here today to talk about my family and not just the bride and groom. Mary's mother and I are delighted to be able to host this event, welcoming so very many family and friends from places both near and far. As I look around the room, I see some very special people, and we welcome them here to Texas. We know that although you were not born here in Texas, just like Denise and I, you got here as soon as you could. Although I have very special stories I could tell you about most of these people, I'm going to limit my comments today to but a very few, my immediate family. I might point out that when I decided to do this, I sat down at the computer and using primarily my two index fingers, I typed this out over a period of perhaps 45 minutes or so. There are many typos. I did learn that you can type twice as fast with two fingers as you can with one finger. And there have been essentially no changes from this since the original draft poured out of my brain. I asked Denise to proof it for me. She declined. She doubts that I'll get through it without crying. I suspect that she's right, but you can help me out by laughing. Laughing a lot. It is meant to be funny, uplifting, if you will. Well, here goes. My immediate family. First, of course, is the woman who made all this possible, Denise, my wife. By the way, for those of you who have not yet had a chance to see my cell phone contact list, Denise is listed there under many names, including best friend, girlfriend, lover, soulmate, and wife. I am not certain what the police or some lawyer will say someday when they find my lost cell phone, but it makes me smile just thinking about it. I first met Denise, oops, that was the DJ taught me that. I first met Denise in 1979. She was a single mother working the night shift as a nurse's aide, not certain what it was that she was going to do with the rest of her life. So, on her way to work, one late evening, she stopped by the chapel at St. Joseph's Hospital, and she prayed for guidance, for a sign of what it was that she was to do. At 2 a.m., on that very night, I was called to the ER to take care of a man with a gallbladder attack. As fate would have it, the surgical floor was full, and thus we had to admit him to the medical floor, where Denise worked. When the elevator door opened, Denise stepped out to transport him to his room. I could not take my eyes off of her. A few hours later, I returned to the hospital very early that same morning so I could ask her out to dinner. When I picked her up for dinner, 2 nights later, I presented her with a single yellow rose. No, I did not know then that 4 years later, we would be moving to Texas, home of the yellow rose. Upon my picking her up from her sister's house, Denise immediately told me that she'd been married before and that she had a son named Matthew. She could not have known then that my first marriage ended with my wanting children and my first wife wanting a career. Denise and I were married less than 4 months later. Denise continues to be my soulmate, my lover, and yes, my best friend. I love her very much. As you may know, and as these many pictures reveal, Denise and I have traveled around the world, much more so than the average person. People ask me why I travel so much. My response is always the same and is reflected in these pictures. Look closely and you will see that the scenery is the one constant, and she is so very beautiful. And one final point, I know that Denise already knows this, my favorite words to say are I love you too. Matthew had been without a dad for nearly 3 years. He tended to call every man he met Daddy. Denise warned me of this tendency. She made it clear to him that he was not to do so when he met me. Matthew called me Sir, with a little lisp, a lisp he had picked up from Denise because the only time they got to spend together was when she was too tired herself to speak clearly. Yet soon after our marriage, Matthew was helping me build a wheelbarrow in the garage of our home in Maine. It was then that he asked me a very important question. Sir, the little boy said, "Are you my daddy?" As a person long known for my inability to lie, I could not just say yes or no, but instead I responded, "Well, Matthew, what do you think?" He said, "Yes, I think you are." And my response, "Then I guess that I am," brought a great big grin to his face, a grin that I will never forget. Matthew, I may not be your father, but I am your dad. Matthew has grown up, pursued various interests. And he's now married to his wonderful wife, Rainey. Matthew is now a dad himself, the father of our first grandchild, Connell. Now, an interesting story about Connell. Less than a year ago, Connell walked into our home sporting a new haircut, parted on the left and combed over the top. I immediately recognized that he reminded me of someone that I knew from years ago. I went to our old photo albums and I found this picture. I showed it to Connell and asked him who it was. He responded that it was Connell. I showed him some other pictures of the same little boy, and each time he responded as if it was pictures of himself. These were, of course, pictures of me. It is amazing how one's appearance is influenced by those who love you. I love you, Connell.
I love you too.
And for those of you who read the book or seen the movie, The Time Traveler's Wife, I thought you might enjoy this picture that I then took of Connell, and its positioning then near that of myself. Turning now to Michael, you may find it strange when I tell you that I've known Michael for nearly 40 years. You may ask, how can that be? He's only 29 years old. Well, from the time I was a college student, I had a reoccurring dream about a little blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy who would cling to my leg when he was shy and hold my hand when we crossed the street. And his name was, you guessed it, Michael David. So when Denise gave birth to our second child and we discovered it was a boy, it was no surprise what his name would be. But of course, Michael David was not the child of my dreams. For instance, when told that he needed to hold someone's hand when crossing the street, we'd sometimes find Michael holding his own hand. He would explain to us that we never did tell him whose hand he was to hold. He also told Denise that he had middle child syndrome, and we needed to have a fourth child in order to make him better. We did not have a fourth child, but Michael turned out just fine. Or, wait a minute, maybe it was that middle child thing that resulted in his walking across the stage for his high school graduation in moose slippers. Michael learned a lot while growing up and while attending college in Boston. And it would appear that Boston, too, learned a lot from Michael. We are all aware of the change in performance of Boston's Patriots, Red Sox, Celtics, and Bruins since his arrival there in 2001. Although there may be other explanations, we are convinced that it's the good luck brought to Boston by a young man with a positive attitude, a young man liked by all who know him well. Those of us in Houston are looking forward to the day when Michael returns to Texas. I am certain that the Houston Aeros, Astros, Rockets, and Texans could use his help. And Salvador, after that miserable performance by the Cowboys against the Giants last month, you too should be hoping for some of Michael's luck to come our way.